What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Chris Lehto, retired F-16 pilot, now investigating anomalous phenomena. I'm very excited to be joined by former Navy pilot Ryan Graves. Ryan was a Gimbal Witness and is an expert in unidentified aerial phenomena. He's brought this topic to Congress. He personally briefed Congress as one of the first fighter pilots to brief Congress, and has brought this topic to the forefront of public discourse. Graves served as a Navy pilot for over a decade, flying the F-18 Super Hornet, and completed multiple tours of duty overseas. He was awarded several commendations for his service, including the Strike Flight Air Medal and the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal. While serving as a Hornet pilot, Ryan reported and documented several encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena. In 2019, he was one of only a few pilots who spoke out publicly about their experiences with UAP, bringing renewed attention to the phenomenon and sparking discussions about the need for more significant investigation and disclosure. Since retiring from the Navy, Graves has advocated for an increased investigation into the UAP phenomena. In this interview, we will dive deep into Ryan's personal experiences as a Gimbal Witness, his thoughts on the recent balloon shootdowns, the disclosure efforts by the US government, and what he believes the future holds for the field of UFO UAP research. If you're as curious as I am about the UAP mystery, you will not want to miss this interview. Thanks for being here. Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files. Okay, welcome. I am here with Ryan Graves. I think he needs very little, if any, introduction to viewers of my channel. So thank you so much, Ryan. I know you're a busy man, for taking time out of your day. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here, Chris. My pleasure.
Yeah, excellent. So I just released actually a video. I released it tonight as we're filming this on your recent article in Politico. And you mentioned really about this program, I think, Americans for Safe Aerospace, among other things in the article. I go through it in detail if anyone wants to check that out. It's an excellent article. So I guess, what is Americans for Safe Aerospace, and why did you create it?
Yeah, so Americans for Safe Aerospace is a pretty simple concept, and it's a concept that I've been speaking out for a while, which is like we should have situational awareness of what's going on over our heads. And when we do find something that shouldn't be there, it really can fall into two categories. It can either fall into a national security bucket, and we should, treat that seriously and prosecute those threats with our military apparatus, or it's something else. And in the past, the something else category was ignored. But the fact of the matter is, there's enough data and enough information that tells us that there is a safety hazard with these objects. We don't know what they are. My guess would be that we'll start to, as we look closer into that anomalous bucket, we'll find perhaps some things that are related to adversarial spy programs, things of that nature. But there's enough things that we're seeing in that bucket that don't make sense with what we observe with our adversaries, that we need to continue to pursue that avenue and go down it. And so Americans for Safe Aerospace is an entity that can focus on focused advocacy, targeting Capitol Hill to ensure the fight for transparency doesn't get dwindled down with one election, to help build the coalition, to help educate the populace, and to show people on Capitol Hill, our elected officials, that their constituents actually care about this issue, and provide recommendations on how they can move the conversation forward.
Okay, wow. And this, I noticed you used a F-22. I was surprised, because you're Navy, you flew F-18s.
Yeah.
I was Air Force, actually. So, and also interesting is Christopher Mellon has just been hammering the Air Force for basically not sharing. He said in one of his recent articles is that they are actually hostile to providing information to any sort of forces or anything. Is that your experience? What is your take on the Air Force, and why did you use an F-22, I guess?
I'd say my general take on the Air Force's lack of presence in this conversation is pretty much the same as everyone else's. It's a glaring gap. I have no reason to doubt that their aviators are seeing these issues on their sensor platforms as well, whether that's in the air or actually, some of the missile defense and other platforms and systems that the Air Force operates. But why they're not speaking about it, I don't know. And as to the F-22, it's a pretty looking plane. There's no doubt about it. I didn't pick it though. Some of my partners did, and I didn't want to start second guess jet selection pictures.
I figured that was just a great example. Like why we need this is because we're not sharing the information. We need uh, basically to get the word out. Yeah, exactly. And you've been doing that for your Merge podcast. So basically, your Merge podcast, I saw you've hit the ground running. You already have amazing interviews lined up. You do the in-person interview. So I guess what made you choose to do that route? To go the podcast route. Did you ever think you'd be a podcaster? I never thought I would.
No, I mean, I didn't either, but there was just a very open need I saw, and people were directly asking me to fill that need, or at least questioning why it wasn't being filled, which was, why are you the only pilot talking about this? And of course, there's other examples like yourself and others, but um, I recognize the risk that pilots take talking about this topic publicly, especially when engaging with the mainstream media, because traditionally you have no idea how this topic is going to be treated, and more often than not would be accompanied with X-Files soundtracks and things of that nature. So what pilot who's put their entirety of their life behind their training wants to not just risk their job but their career, which many of us are very, very passionate about, on this topic, even though it's interesting, especially when you're the only person that's seen it. But now we're having greater transparency, and I think part of that is due to the fact that we're capturing these objects on a multitude of sensors that are getting distributed across very reliable sensor nets, and that information is recorded and can be reviewed at later dates. And so, we've kind of moved past that kind of, hey, I saw something over there, but now we have an integrated picture where we can bring everything in and hopefully assess what happened afterwards. Now, we're not in a manner where we can do that openly or publicly right now, but I'm sure you're well aware, Chris, that F-16s, have optical sensors and electro-optical sensors, and the 3 recent objects that were shot down very likely have accompanying data that go with that missile shoot that would likely help resolve that current mystery.
Yeah, I saw that they're not going to release it. I just saw an article that the DoD has decided not to release any of those videos. For sure they have the targeting pod video from the Lake Huron F-16 shoot down, and I'm assuming they have other electro-optical data. Probably not the F. I can understand they don't share F-35, right? I've never even seen the electro-optical, from an F-35, so I can understand they don't share that. But it seems like they could share at least the F-16, and Marco Rubio mentioned that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they will share that information, or is that what your organization is pushing for, to try and to share information like that to get them to release it?
Our goal is not necessarily to push for any, one specific release of information, or to generally advocate for overall declassification of information. But this is a conversation that the public needs to be involved with. And there are certain things that at the end of the day, we just don't want to reveal, whether we took an image in a certain location, or whether, the resolution of such an image from such a location was, so high. And so there's all sorts of national security reasons, as you're aware, of why we wouldn't want to necessarily share everything. So no, the goal isn't to necessarily just push at all costs to kind of open up the vaults to see what's in there, but to do so in a manner that's strategic and makes sense for moving this conversation forward in a way that can be successful, right? Because if we just look to break the door down, that's not going to be successful. But we need to establish relationships where we can work ourselves into an understanding of what the data is, and help bring ourselves to an understanding of how to understand that data, versus always trying to jump to a conclusion about what something is. I don't think, a lot of us seem to be waiting for the government to give us that one piece of information that will, quote unquote, change everything in a sense. But, I think I personally take a little more, first principled approach where, we can figure this out on our own, but we should still collaborate with the government to try to leverage the work that they've already done. And so within the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, I founded and chair the UAP Integration Committee. And that is a more technically focused activity. We have 2 primary efforts, a human factors and a hardware factors effort, which Chris will recognize as aviation safety terminology. And our hardware factors right now, our primary areas of focus is to concentrate on detection, characterization, and evaluation methodologies related to UAP detection across a multitude of sensor platforms and sensing phenomenologies. And that's information we're going to collate and provide, confidence levels and other, engineering specifications that this budding industry and the general aerospace industry can look to say, okay, here's how we can improve or modify our sensors to work in this environment or to work for these types of targets that otherwise we haven't typically been looking for. And on the
Okay,
human factors, sorry, I'll stop real quick. I
go
feel like
ahead.
I'm talking a lot, but on the human factor side, we'll be able to take that information, apply that to a safety framework to provide recommendations for reporting procedures and other procedures as related to avoidance, and look to promulgate those to the proper authorities so that everyone's aware of the proper way to react to these situations. And this isn't me talking. We have experts that do this professionally with astronauts and other tactical aviators that are very smart, very capable people that, will sit down next to a pilot in a cockpit and, work out procedures from a first principle standpoint, write papers on it. And so taking a very careful to measured approach on it. And those two ecosystems will inform each other and enhance, and achieve our mission, which is to enhance aerospace safety in regards to UAP.
Yeah, I think I was a safety officer for several years as well. Love investigating. I think that's why I ended up falling into investigating UAPs, just finding the causal issues, and preserving resources is really what it's about. Which I thought was awesome. It's like the opposite of blowing stuff up. It's like preserving. We can just preserve our resources and we'll win.
Yeah.
It's kind of the idea, and that's what I really got I could tell that was your intent. It was the safety angle, really, from your first briefing. And I'll bring it up now. This is at least the first one I saw. So I don't know. And you mentioned here was your American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, or not yours, I'm sorry, but how are you affiliated with them, I guess?
Sure. At the time that this was recorded, I wasn't affiliated with them. I might have been a member just for my engineering background, but no real activity. And they asked me to provide this presentation at their Aviation 2021 conference. Shortly after that is when they asked me and several others to help them start and strategize on a integration outreach committee potentially within the AIAA. So at this point, I wasn't. Now I'm the chair of that integration committee that I helped found. We have about 50 members. Number of efforts, but yeah, so it's not a paid, everything there is volunteer. It's a professional organization. So I'm not necessarily, I'm associated with the AIAA. I'm just, I'm a participant and a member in a leadership position.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's excellent. And what I appreciate about that, your angle at least, is it seems like the government is so far removed from even being able to talk about it. They can't even say the word. I'll close this for a second. It seems like DoD can't even really say the word UFO or alien. It's almost like they can't enter the room because everyone looks at them. Where it seems like if they could be handed some sort of middle ground, like I don't know if lobbyists would do that in a sense, to basically say, here is how you can think about this, or here is how you could approach this problem, talking about it from a safety viewpoint, human factors, sensor modalities. I mean, I think that's just a great way to
education,
professionally move it forward. Yeah. So just to give them some, like you say, educating them on, where is this huge gap? What's in there? Is something really dangerous in there, or something we need to consider, or is there nothing in there? But at least
on one end of the
them.
spectrum, there's people that say, hey, this doesn't exist and I don't accept that these are a reality, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that say, okay, I accept they exist, but none has ever hit an aircraft, so therefore they're not an aviation safety hazard, which, as you know, is not a very complete understanding of aviation safety. And so, yeah, it's a communication challenge to bridge those kind of disparate areas together.
Yeah, we had exercises. So my last job in the Air Force, I was commanding. We were talking a little bit before the Tactical Leadership Program, which is a large force exercise. And I remember one of the exercises, we got no safety reports, no safety incidents, and it just sent up like a red flag. Where it just like the safety hairs in the back of my neck like stood up. With no safety incidents. yeah, you can just say there's no incidents and you'll have no problems, until something crashes and surprise. The first step is really is knowing you have an issue and tracking it. So it seems like a great way to present that is, hey, here's the modalities, here's how you could possibly increase your sensors, and do it in a way that's not necessarily like me yelling at them on YouTube. I think it could be a way they can save face and kind of enter the problem. So yeah, fully support it. Yeah, that being said, let's go. This briefing was so awesome. I just wanted to run through a couple questions on uh, really the kind of the gimbal. It's really just like the go-to video, I think. So in the Nimitz, though, you see really all the witness testimony on the Nimitz plus the FLIR one. But on the East Coast with the gimbal, that video along with Go Fast, along with other witness testimonies, just seems like really kind of the a gold standard, on the East Coast. So if you could just maybe just talk brief intro on your initial conditions, how you led up to this event.
Sure. And so, this essentially represents when we started seeing objects operating in our working areas for the very first time after upgrading our radar. We were regularly seeing what I'll just loosely call smaller form factor objects that were primarily stationary or proceeding or holding in a holding pattern, or kind of just proceeding in a non-specific direction, just kind of meandering at relatively high speed, 0.6 to 0.8 Mach. On occasion, see them 1.1, 1.2 Mach, only ever heading east or kind of southeast, not over land. And then eventually we left, right? And that was kind of the status quo. We were seeing these objects, and we left and we went out to our workup cycle on I think it was called TISTA, is the workup exercise on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay, so sorry, a little too fast. It's exciting. So when you say APG 73 to 79, right? So that was a new upgrade, but I got the impression that you've used that before. Did you use that newer radar when you were teaching?
So I did not use. So at that point in my career, I had maybe used that radar once or twice, maybe a handful of times, because they started transitioning in at the Fleet Replacement Squadron, which is actually the largest fighter squadron in the United States, VFA 106, or maybe at least the Navy. But that's the training squadron for the East Coast fighters. And so that's where they started transitioning the radar. I don't know whether first or not, but that's where I first had one. At that point, you're not doing a whole lot in the radar. You're just trying to stay clear of air traffic, more or less. And then I went to a APG 73 squadron, went out on deployment, came back, and then the squadron was upgrading our radars so that we all had APG 79s. So I had used it slightly, but had no real expertise on it.
Okay, yeah, you didn't have used it for years kind of feel.
I haven't used it tactically.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so excellent. Yeah, sorry. And then you did see him out here, but you didn't, I guess, think much of it until you went down south to Florida.
Well, we were thinking something of it because we almost hit them up on the East Coast, and that's when we filed our first safety report. But we started seeing them on the radar, and we're like, okay, these are probably weird temperature inversions or other weird errors that the mechanically scanned array radars had demonstrated in the past. But then
the stationary over the ground is really the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Sorry. And that's kind of oh, maybe that's like a bug, because that's so weird for something in the air that, maybe it's a software bug type situation. And that's kind of just generally where we were thinking this was going, maybe some kind of weird reflection. But then, of course, as we get close enough, everything else is slewing to these sensors. And as you're typically locking up close radar contacts, so you know what's closest, your close alligator canoe, and all your sensors slew over. And of course, as we got within FLIR range of the objects, we started noticing higher energy coming from those locations. And that's when we were like, okay, these are, we have to assume these are physical objects now. If our radar is dumping us off on something that's reflective, essentially, of IR energy. But then we'd try to fly up to it, and we'd merge with them as close as we felt comfortable with. Typically, flying 1,000 feet below or 500 feet below the object, looking up, trying to capture it. with our eyeballs, but very difficult to see, even though our helmet's showing us where to look. When I say very difficult, I mean we could not see it. We turn back around, it would still be on our sensors. And then that, that was that until we almost hit one of them when one of these objects was directly at the entrance of our working areas. And when you had that near midair, that's the first time I'm aware that it was described visually or seen visually. And that's when we get the dark cube or black cube inside a clear sphere. And that's when we were like, okay, we got to file a HAZREP. Like, we've had a near miss. We don't really have another choice here. And that's when we basically just started submitting HAZREPs for all of these.
Yeah, so I mentioned in your Politico article, basically it says, you say at the end, this is the phenomena I witnessed. And I noticed on Twitter, of course, it inspires a, whatever tweet storm about, you didn't actually visually see it. But I guess I got the impression that by witnessing it is you're seeing it with all your sensors. So basically all the jet sensors that we trained to for so many years, where you get to know the radar warning receiver, you can tell how far away your wingman is by, the tickle from his radar, et cetera. So how many times do you think you tried to go and merge with these things, and you should have been in range? Could it have been a balloon? I guess could these have been balloons?
So I've identified and flown up and merged with balloons before. It's not that exciting or controversial. You typically see the object out there and it's drifting with the wind, and you lock it up, and if you're feeling real spicy, you want to check it out, then that's something you can do. Or typically the balloons I've seen are usually surprises more than anything else on occasion. But as we put our lives on these systems. We operate in very dangerous situations where those are the only things between life and death are those systems. When we then make the assumption that because I didn't physically see the eyeball, that negates the entire experience. The same argument would be true if it was the exact opposite, right? So if I only saw it with my eyeballs and not with the sensor systems or any variant of, there's going to be problems. But yes, we would see it on the sensors. Me personally, I interacted with them on the FLIR and the radar. I tried to merge with them maybe 8 to 10 times, but eventually, and of course, there's only so much we're going to do. And we're going to just, once we almost hit the objects, we weren't merging with them at that point. We essentially just said, all right, if it's in our subdivided working area, we're just going to, move to a new working area. So there is a data discrepancy that could be there. Do all these objects represent physical objects? It's unknown, right? Because we haven't physically seen an object there that's related to every one of those radar contacts. But as a tactical aviator, any aviator, you have to assume that they are. And we need to collect more data, right? We need to go out there and we need to collect more data. And those are efforts that we're looking towards with the AIAA. So I'll just say, I'm not here to claim to have all the answers, but I'm claiming there's enough uncertainty to go figure it out and that we have the tools to do so.
And I guess I keep seeing in the news that they're seeing them daily on the East Coast. Are we still seeing them on the East Coast?
I don't have any special knowledge, I would say, other than calling up buddies, but most of my buddies aren't necessarily on that coast anymore. So it's been almost 10 years now. So I've made statements to that effect that essentially I would say I have high confidence in all the way up to about 2019, 2020, 2021, even a little bit, but kind of post COVID, it's kind of a different crew. I haven't really been checking on a regular basis, but there's been reporting. So we have, the UAP task force reporting that went out, included 144 cases. Although technically it said from 2004 to about 2019, I think it was. I think the vast majority of those cases were in the 2018 to 2019 timeframe, since that's when the only reporting collection period that I'm aware of. And so, even again, just recently with the last report, there was upwards of 300 and something. So I don't know what the math is on the areas, but they're seeing quite a few of them out there, whether it's literally every day or some close degree of that. It's still a persistent problem.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take here on just why I have you, because you were in the air with the gimbal video. I've done a lot of analysis videos on the gimbal. The main argument, basically, with Mick West is that it's far away. It's an object far away.
Yeah.
And then I tried to show, or I believe I showed, using two different methods. Geometrically, just how we draw up. As we're taught to draw up fighter engagements, and then I flew it in DCS. That this object would be less than 10 miles away. It's kind of what I determined. And that being the case now, whether it is some sort of weird, electro-optical spinning glare system inside the targeting pod, it still doesn't look like I can't identify it. So I'm unable to identify the gimbal. And so I just want to get your take. I think it's just an amazing video we have to kind of run through. I have the video kind of set up. If we could just kind of talk through, if I can get you to think back to that day.
So
we have here, this is your brief. Yeah.
So start. Yeah, I mean, so yes, pretty much every time a air wing, operates, there's foreign activity around us. That's just kind of a given, essentially, although we were briefed on specifics, or we do get briefed on specifics. Like I said, we went to do our workup cycle. We got on the boat, Virginia Beach, we cruised down and started doing operations. The objects were down there as well. And when I say objects, I mean the similar kind of sporadically spaced objects that we were seeing in the Whiskey 72 areas. Go out and do a number of air-to-air training missions, all sorts of different types. If memory serves me, this was an air-to-air mission. And they went out, so kind of guys on each side, pretending to be the bad guys, pretending to be and the good guys. Not pretending to be the good guy. So anyway, as you all go out there at the same time, more or less. And then as you essentially hit your fuel limitations, you start to head back. And in the Navy, that happens a little bit different than the Air Force, because in the Navy, we have to land at a very specific time. The boat opens at a specific time. And so we operate tactically, and we keep ourselves on what's called a fuel ladder. And it's basically broken down from 15 to perhaps 5-minute intervals of what our fuel rate should be, our fuel numbers should be, based off of our estimated burn for how tactical we're going to be and things of that nature. We have to get pretty anal about it. So
yeah, it makes sense. Same with the large force exercises, because we could only, on a single runway, we could only land two, you have a certain amount of aircraft you can land at a time. It was a big limit for our exercise.
Yeah, so when you're on a boat, you're always dealing with that kind of constraint. And so when you're done, you're doing your air-to-air combat, I reached my ladder numbers, time to throttle back, come out, no more burner, out of mill, and then you're hanging back at a max endurance Mach number.
So that's your max. It's usually a lower speed. It's not a fighting speed. It gives you your max time in the air.
To hang out, waiting for the boat to open up, right? So that's how we do our math up there, essentially. And so people run out of gas on their own pace, and they, crawl back to the boat slowly. And it doesn't matter where you go, as long as you can get back in time, as long as you're at that slow airspeed, right? So the aircrew in question here, at the part of the flight, when they, were low on gas, brought themselves back to essentially the max endurance. And while they were heading, in the vicinity of the boat, they picked up radar contacts that they weren't expecting to see. That had some interesting characteristics, such as a formation of objects, but we'll get to that in a moment. And so they went to investigate. It was strange because the objects were coming from the east of the boat, which were pretty far out there. And what they do typically is we'll have people that launch from the shore in older aircraft, like turbojet aircraft and old fighters, and they try to penetrate the boat's airspace, essentially, like a big war game. Right? And so we'll intercept. If we're in a training mission, we'll have to still have situational awareness that that's going on, and either knock off the fight or let the boat know. But typically, there's people doing that job exclusively. But either way, so that's kind of part of the game. And when they saw these radar contacts, you're like, oh, maybe this is something. So they still have to maintain the max E. They can't just run out of gas. So they kind of just creep over there and go intercept it slowly. But these objects were going pretty slow, if I recall, 150-ish knots. And as the object was essentially, I'll just say, oh my camera's reversed, but left to right.
I hope you're enjoying this interview. My channel runs solely through YouTube views and the generous support of patrons. So please consider smashing that like button if you do like this video, and and then helps me dial in, get you the best content possible. And if you want backstage access, along with early access to these videos and no ads, support the channel at patreon.com/Chris Lehto for only $5 a month. Get all those benefits. In the end, no, thanks just for being here. You make the channel a success. Let's get back to the interview.
So the objects were proceeding essentially left to right. They intercepted the object. They stern convert, which essentially means they're going to basically try to end up behind that vehicle based off of its direction from wherever they are. So they're trying to stern convert this object, which is proceeding, essentially on the east side of the aircraft carrier. It's proceeding more or less kind of tangential to, the radius of the circle of the boat. So it's not coming at the boat, but it's kind of like going near it. Has a near point to the boat, but it's not coming that close, essentially. And so they intercept these objects, essentially just maneuvering their aircraft to try to end up behind the objects. And that's essentially the best way to keep yourself in a consistent position. And they got to about 4 to 6 miles is, literally what the aircrew told me. And that was as close as they wanted to get because it was dark. They could not see the objects, and they're not going to just fly up to. Wasn't just one object, but it was one object plus this other kind of fleet of objects. And so what we see on the gimbal video is the gimbal object, which I represent. I represent in that last image you were showing as that circle with the line in it. So that's that circle with the line in it kind of represents the gimbal object, and the fleet of objects, I can't remember, it was like 4 to 6, but it was somewhere in that, and they were in that V-shaped formation, right? And I'm reciting this from the situational awareness page, which is our God's eye view. And you hear the pilot say, "Hey, look at that SA page." He's not saying ASA page, he's saying the SA page, which is the situational awareness page, which is SOP statements that we say all the time. And so we're looking at a God's eye view, and that's where you can see all the radar data that's combined, and that's where you see the fleet of objects. And those objects, again, kind of proceeding left to right. This shows that direction. So the aircraft would essentially be where your mouse is, more or less. The F-18 is where your mouse is, more or less, just in that general direction, essentially.
Yeah.
And so the objects turned away from the F-18, the formation. It was kind of a jumbled turn and still pretty tight. It's not like seeing like a wedge where people coming to the inside of the turn, how you'd expect that with fighters or something like that. They jumbled up, but not in a manner like coming to the inside of the turn. Like some of them kind of went to the outside turn, which is very jumbled. And they, and it was very tight. And then they immediately proceeded in the opposite direction. And the gimbal object, which is, this drawing is not completely accurate because the gimbal was more offset away from the echelon, but it was trailing it. But it according to the SA page was just proceeding in that line and then just bounced in the other direction, essentially. And again, that's a God's eye view. So from our interpretation at that point, it just, essentially stopped going in that direction and proceeded in the opposite direction, the trail, the formation there. And at that time, I didn't have situational awareness to the fact that it had climbed. My understanding of it performing a climb to make that bouncing maneuver and making a vertical climb comes from a reconstruction that was done later of the flight path that actually demonstrated the climb. Because at the time, when we look at our tapes, maybe it's just me, I'm a bad pilot, but I'm kind of more focused on the horizontal radar aspect than the vertical one. So that I wasn't looking at the vertical radar indicator. But on the situational awareness page, again, it looked flat because that's just what we see. And on the radar page, excuse me, we didn't have the radar page up. It was just the FLIR. So you see what you see.
So then this accelerated, climbed. I guess I didn't know that the gimbal climbed. And then
so I've seen reconstructions that have had a model, and what that model shows is that the reason it bounced like that was because the object actually climbed about 300 to 500 feet. I forget the exact number. Climbed and did a vertical turn to proceed in the opposite direction. And that model is the same model. I think Mick West actually created that model. And the model shows a flight path, and the variable that is in that model is how far away the object is from the aircraft that's observing it. If it's very far away, it's basically a flat line. If it's close, under 10 miles, it's essentially a J-hook, vertical, flight path. And
Yeah,
so,
as you draw it, yeah, when we draw fights, as soon as someone goes straight vertical, it's just a line.
yeah.
You gotta go. You gotta go
So,
to the
that's where I
side view.
actually, it was actually Mick's assessment of and his model that showed me that it climbed slightly.
Hmm.
It's just, Mick's flaw in his assessment is that he disregards all pilot testimony in this, which is very clear that this object is within 10 miles of the aircraft that observed it, not 30 miles. So
Yeah, and I thought I proved it using geometry. You can't argue with geometry. But here we have, yeah, the gimbal. I mean, is this what you guys were seeing, like representatives similar to this, all the time, or was this
no,
something
we hadn't
different? I think you
seen the
said it's
gimbal
something
object
different.
before this. At least I hadn't, right? And I wasn't the keeper of all information, this topic. Most of us were, again, not actively engaging in this, but I hadn't seen anything like that. No one had seen anything, as when we were debriefing it, and that was unique to us. The smaller objects in the formation appeared, at least on the radar, as what we were seeing in Virginia Beach, and I say that based off of the target aspect indicator and how that moved around.
Hmm.
That's the only reason I say that, is because they seem similar that way.
And that's where you think this is just seeing that stationary, seeing the target aspect like this.
Because they would do that when they were moving as well. It would still have that
It would
appearance, the
still
target
spin
aspect.
around the aspect.
Not all the way around, but it would still be uncertain within like a 120-degree cone, essentially, of its general motion. So it was like better, but not like fully good when they were moving.
Yeah, it's almost like the velocity is getting messed with, the Doppler shift.
Yeah.
It's yeah, because yeah, you can notice aspect angle and all that stuff is issues for electronic attack. Interesting. But and then this zero Mach, I don't know. So on high wind days, I've read through like the range Fowler reports. Those are released on the East Coast. I think they did a terrible job of, not protecting the people's information. I think we could do a better job of protecting that, but releasing more of the information. I couldn't track down when they said that they were seeing these things stationary and also getting the high winds. I couldn't find one case where they were saying it was stationary and where the winds was actually released as a high number. But
I'll
do you
send it to
remember?
you because there is a FOIA one that specifically says that they're in 120 knot winds and they're fighting to keep the aircraft in the area, and yet the object is stationary.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, then I need to find that one.
I'll send it to
I'm
you.
thinking incorrectly. Excellent. Yeah. So there's at least one. So 120 knots up at, gimbals of at 20,000 feet is my guess in the 20 to 25,000 foot range. The highest helicopter, the record landing for a helicopter is Mount Everest, actually, in 2005. I just saw that today. Amazing video. It was a Bell or Airbus helicopter lands up at Everest, and that's the max. So that's 29,000 feet essentially. So I don't know. It seems like you could get up there. You could get up to, well, not 35,000 feet that you have here, right? Let me see. You have 35,000 feet. So 35,000 feet altitudes. If it's something up at above 29,000 feet, then it's higher than the world record for helicopter flight, landing at least.
Yeah, I don't know how long a helicopter can stay up at those altitudes either, but it'd probably take a lot of fuel to get up there. I wonder what the time on station would be because, if we're going to entertain helicopters, as a theory, that helicopter would have to get to those altitudes and then maintain up there longer flight time than an F-18.
Yeah, I think it goes to drone technology, because the only thing I could consider, I guess, if you had high winds and you had a helicopter and it was flying exactly into the wind at 120 knots, then that could be a possibility.
Yeah, you'd need something you need a really windy day, but that would still be impossible to be like perfectly still.
Exactly. Yeah. So it just seems like that that is really the one kind of indicator there for me that it's breakthrough. So how do you know that that they were there, like how can you confirm that it was the same target? You know,
We
normally it's
can't.
20
So we
seconds,
can't.
you know?
And I've tried to say that before, right? We can.
Mm.
I admit there's very clever ways that perhaps new objects could be traded in and out in a manner that was invisible to us via some technological magic, perhaps. But
Mm.
I that's just the reality of the situation because we haven't had eyes on these objects or sensors on these objects for continuous periods of time. That's just not to my knowledge. So to answer your question, we can't. But common sense logic and at this point, indicates to us that that massive, operation to exchange these objects, perhaps from submarines or something that at this stage in the game has been occurring on a regular basis for almost a decade, um, starts to kind of lose some of its, I don't know, loses some of its believability for me to consider that as a viable option. Now, at the if we zoom way back to 2014, if we look at it in isolation at that point in time and say, how could this be happening? That seems feasible to me, and, even us, we weren't willing to say it was unexplainable at that point. We assumed it was some type of drone or something. But, fast forward 8 years with all the attention and activity that's gone into it, I think that looking at it under that context makes it hard to think that that would be the case.
And also just personally, right? You said you saw these things on the radar, right? You went to intercept it. Either you were waiting, you basically had excess time, essentially, using the gas. Um, so you go and intercept this thing. You can't see anything with your eyes, right? Visually, within safe distance, say a few thousand feet, maybe.
We
Um,
get we get 500 feet if we could, but we
really,
usually
yeah,
come up low if they were consistent. But I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but that was just my experience. And we had more time too, because when we're off the coast of Virginia Beach, where we don't have those fuel concerns, and you know, it might just be a flight. Hey, we need to go figure out some training to do. So, go program a few weapons into the jet and go burn an hour of time. So sometimes you have more opportunity to go mess around. Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, this is actually good training, I think. Actually, I mean, I can't think of much, especially if you have two people and you're of air-to-air loadout and you want to practice dogfighting or something. But if you just have just some you're in an air-to-ground loadout or something and you have time, it seems like locking something up, trying to intercept it, is good training. I think trying to identify these UAPs could actually be decent training, I guess, is what I'm proposing.
Better than doing it on airlines.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we already do that. So yeah, and then the video, man. What is your take on the gimbal video? I guess, what do you? So what do you have you heard the whole argument on it being the gimbal inside of the targeting pod? Um,
Loosely, I haven't looked into the math, so to speak, but
it
dude,
seems
these guys
pretty.
had this thing on their camera systems and on the radar for 5 minutes. They flew out of their way to intercept this.
Yeah,
There was a formation of the fact that this is something in their and they just came from an air-to-air combat flight, you know what I mean? So I
yeah.
mean, with a perfectly working system. So it just doesn't make sense to me that this would be some type of weird camera issue that no one had ever seen before. Um, yeah, I don't know how else to address that.
Well, I think so for me, like the turning actually is compelling, and the only reason I was able to do it is able to see it. Even the argument was if I covered up, if I covered up the gimbal, basically, if you cover this up, I wish I could do it somehow. Maybe I can. Yeah, but anyway, if you cover this area up with your hand, and then if you try and see, you feel where you think it would turn. When I raise my hand, I can see that it turned, meaning that there's information in the background. I would yeah, try it. I guess just cover up when you get a time on your own. Is you cover up the gimbal with your hand and then try and guess, without seeing any other indications when it turns. And I was able to tell that. I lift my hand. I'm like, yep, that's where it turns. So I think his argument that it's inside the system, at least just from my opinion, is viable, but it shouldn't look like this anyway. Like it's, the reason I think you and I have never seen this before, it doing something weird like that, is because it shouldn't look like that anyway inside of 10 nautical miles. It shouldn't be this weird monocolor, glare thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that, but I think that there's a lot more information that can be gleaned off of the radar data situational awareness page, that provides context of where these aircraft or objects came from, where they originated from, how long our systems were tracking, and that stuff's captured in the system. It might not be processed and presented to a particular pilot, but as the aircraft and the ship sensors are looking out into the sky and doing their job, that information lives in the system. So going forward, I'm not saying it's all safe somewhere, but going forward, that's information that can be gleaned out of the system. We can capture those radar tracks and build an analysis of the objects and their behavior and perhaps their origin, time on station, all these parameters that we care about. That when the government releases these videos, we're never going to get to the bottom of anything. We're just going to churn and churn and churn and churn and churn, and waste time when we could be looking at hard data, which they have but are not releasing, that could provide answers, right? So I see a lot of these kind of video type conversations as pointless, because no image that is ever released from the government will ever be trusted 100% by anyone, especially in this modern age. An image of something is not viable proof of anything.
What do you think
That
of
goes for
multiple
Gimbal too,
images?
right? Like, these are exceptional and they're strange, but it doesn't prove anything. It shows that there is something anomalous that needs to be investigated, but it's impossible to draw a conclusion from this.
And do you think they'll ever release more information? I mean, can we get them to release more?
Well, that's that's what I've
What
been
happens
spending the
after
last 5
this?
years trying to do, with building different organizations to apply, be able to provide solutions technologically and scientifically, so that we can investigate this and expand the amount of people that have the willingness to look into this, right? Because if we're not all bound by our fear and our shame of looking into this, then there's a lot more people and power that can be brought into this conversation. And same with the ASA. It's going to be an organization that can push the conversation forward in the Capitol Hill, be able to show that their constituents care about this topic. So those are the kind of tools that I'm using to push this conversation forward, because I truly don't think we're ever going to resolve anything in these images. Frankly, I think it's more of an impetus to push for more data and nothing else. Frankly.
And what about the radar tape from the Nimitz? There's the theory. Sorry, there's the Gary Voorhees. He says that the radar data was taken from. He was there. They showed up in Air Force uniforms supposedly and took the radar data. But so far, all these task force, we still haven't received really anything. We got the one iPhone video that Scott Bray released at the UFO hearing, and then we got the basic numbers in the report. Right? They said that there's been this many reports, and most of them, a large majority of them are explainable. But since then, we've had nothing else. So I kind of I kind of agree. I don't think the government will really give us the information, or at least it's very difficult to trust it.
I think there's a couple compounding factors. One of those is that the Aero Office, has been dealing with the same issues I've been dealing with and everything else, which is, buy-in from other people, right? Just because they exist doesn't mean they have the political capital to do anything and make anything happen. They've been understaffed and under-budgeted, and they've been tasked with a great many responsibilities by Congress. But I'm seeing the signs that they are spooling up in the right direction, and that they are moving that conversation forward. I think we'll hear more about that in the near future. But I also think that there's another entity, if you will, which is a difficult, burdensome thing to deal with, which is the U.S. classification system, which is designed to do a very specific purpose. And now it's being asked to do something different in a digital age. And so there's, I think, modernization and changes that need to happen within that system to enable that conversation to proceed more smoothly with the American people. Because I think that's a confounding issue. And I know that there are people, politicians and people that are aware of that issue and are putting energy into opening up those vaults. But that's, I think, a slightly separate battle, and not necessarily anti-UAP. It's just anti-secrets.
Yeah, the classification issue.
Or pro-secrets, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, dealing with classification issues is just, it's terrible, especially as you get into more advanced programs. You know, you just need more and more assets. Anytime you mention space assets, it's super classified. You know, everyone I think complains of classification issues, which is pretty much the opposite of transparency. It seems like. So it's
It is.
yeah,
I
that's
think
where
there's a
I
right
do
way to
think
do it, though.
your ASA kind of could provide a key point there, or at least a consideration that they could release some information like the Lake Huron, or you know, the argument could be made that we could release that targeting pod to show a balloon that can be released. You know,
If
I
nothing
think that
else,
could
we'll
be a
have that
reasonable.
mechanism to push for that now. We'll have an official organization that can go out and ask for that in a manner that, people on Capitol Hill are familiar with dealing with, right? It's an entity that they're,
Mhm.
they're used to working with, and we can provide them policy recommendations and show them that, hey, your constituents actually really do care about this, so maybe you should listen.
Yeah,
You know,
I was curious, and it said, you know, it has the word American in it again, but I kind of am trying to aim globally. Um, but I guess it's a great touch point for like groups, UK UAP Media. I don't know if you've worked with them, Vidi Adams, but to touch with American safety or UAP related issues in the US. Have you heard of San Marino? I guess that they put out a bid for the UN
I
to
have
have
heard
a
of that.
UAP task force.
Hmm.
Did you hear that? That it
I d
seems amazing. It seemed somehow I'd like to or try and get, because I formed UAP Society, which is NFT related. Basically, we partnered with Sky 360 to do camera systems, so they should be finished. Hopefully, this will have them ready for grassroots. I've been trying to impart a global, I guess, global reach, if you will, into it. But it'd be awesome to have ASA kind of interact with UK UAP media, or somehow with the UN. That'd be great to get a part of the UAP task force. I think that'd be so cool. The
Yeah.
United Nations UAP task force. That would be
Yeah.
something.
I think you're absolutely on the right track here. Americans for Safe Aerospace is, focused on, the issues that we have and the ways and the mechanisms to move the conversation forward in the United States. But I think moving the conversation forward in the United States ends with us having this conversation internationally. It doesn't start and end in the United States, but the ASA can perhaps provide a demonstration of how it can be done elsewhere, and to show how you can, push your government to have a constructive and positive conversation in a non-adversarial way, to move it forward. And yeah, to your point, one of the things that I think we need to push for is to have the U.S. government engage with our international allies and others to truly assess whether this is a global issue.
Yeah, I went to the European Space Conference, the 15th annual European Space Conference last month, and I asked the NASA director, you know, for Europe, if anything at all is being done on UAP studies, and he said no, basically nothing. They looked at me blank-eyed, you know, like they hadn't heard of it. So yeah, I think there's still a long way to go. You know, I think we're still not mainstream. As famous as you are, Ryan, I don't think you're fully mainstream yet. You know, I think there's still quite a bit to go.
Well, I had the opportunity and the honor to attend a conference on space warfare that NATO was putting on at the University of Bologna in Italy. And we talked about the economics and the state of affairs with space warfare. And, I was there, and I brought up the topic and was speaking to UAP and how this conversation was likely to grow both as an air and a space safety concern and national security concern. Again, for us, this is very easy math. Unidentified objects are potential threats when it comes to a national security perspective. So it's a very easy conversation for the military mindset to understand. But to your point, I think, encouraging this conversation internationally, and hey, guess what? There's air safety everywhere in the world. There's not a country on this planet, I think, that, wants planes falling out of the sky. So it's, we can build a model of how this works here, and we can take and extend that conversation through those international air safety channels, and get buy-in there, I think.
Yeah, it's excellent. I wanted to ask, just as we're wrapping up here, again, thanks for your time, man. Do you miss flying? We were kind of chatting before. You talked about RMC, which is interesting, which is Rescue Mission Commander. You
Mhm.
mentioned that you did Rescue Mission Commander. And that was my last assignment in the Air Force, was as that tactical leadership program. I actually got to help stand up the rescue mission commander course there. So do you miss that, doing RMC, being a FAC-A? Where did you do your training for FAC-A?
I did FAC-A training on the East Coast. We have our Top Gun instructors have a special syllabus of about, it's like 12 flights, I think, to get fully qualified as a forward air controller airborne, or FAC-A. And then we take a subset out of those trainings. There's maybe only like 3 aircrew in a squadron that are trained for that. And then they essentially, of an entire air wing with the 6 or 7 squadrons, they pick 2 aircrew that are FAC-A trained to go through the RMC training. It's kind of like the graduate course in some sense. And so I did that out in Fallon, which was fantastic, because we were doing a workup cycle there. So we got to do, they're pulling helicopter and someone out into the desert, leaving them there all day. He's getting hunted just like at Red Flag. And, I was the guy in the space or whatever, coordinating the rescue and,
You're Sandy 1?
What's that?
Sandy 1?
No, I didn't recall. I honestly don't remember
really?
what it was, but yeah.
I guess,
Maybe it was Sandy. I just don't remember. Yeah, fantastic training. I loved it. I missed doing it. I missed being at that point in my career and being able to execute on something like that. I don't miss all the work and the training it takes to maintain yourself at that level. But I certainly do miss that experience and being there and being on the front like that.
Yeah, it's brutal. And then, you add in ship training. I'm sure makes it even more complicated.
Yeah, I got to do one. So then we did, when we saw the gimbal, I think it was the gimbal video workup cycle, but I had to do one of the last training events for that, which was a ship base. And I was already graduate at this point as a rescue mission commander, but it was the person that was supposed to do it as their training. I don't remember why they didn't do it. Maybe they were sick or something, but essentially I got a call like 5 in that I was going to do the graduation mission for the whole training event, which was to go out and rescue someone on a ship. With all things, which was super fun. So doing it from a ship, though, is a totally different ballgame, because the fuel concerns are just absolutely insane.
And the helos, you had helos, I'm guessing, on the ship?
Yeah, we had helos and SEAL teams, all that stuff, and P8s and all sorts of other assets. It was really cool to do. Fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's so insane. You mentioned the level you have to maintain. It's crazy, just, yeah.
And thankfully, a skill set I never had to use.
Yeah. Well, I think you're using a lot of those skills now. Most of the fighter pilots I know, when they got out, when they retired, they went to the airlines, which is a great job. I can't blame them, but I think they could have a lot more impact in other parts of the society. So I appreciate everything you're doing, Ryan. Thanks so much, man, for taking your time and for making your competitive podcast. It's doing excellent. No, I wish you all the luck with that. And if I can help in any way, man, I'm happy to collaborate or anything. So thanks again for being here, Ryan. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
The biggest thing I learned is that these objects that we're seeing off the East Coast, as far as we know, are still seeing them, are definitely not balloons. That's what I took out of this interview. Ryan seemed very confident they weren't balloons. He's intercepted balloons before, and we went through again, and the gimbal object is definitely not a balloon. And despite what Mick West argues, the gimbal object was also well within inside of 10 nautical miles. So our pilot should have been able to identify this thing, whatever it was. It was also interesting to learn about the delayed times for the ship landings. It makes sense, right? Total sense, just my lack of experience really. But of course they have landing times, so that allows these pilots to have a lot more time out there flying max endurance. Max endurance is the slowest speed, really the speed based on airflow dynamics, the engines, that the plane can fly the longest. It's usually a slow speed. For us in the F-16 is around 250 knots. Then your max range airspeed, around 300 knots in the Viper, was really to get you the furthest. So that's to go the furthest. So stay the longest, max endurance, go the furthest is called max range. So these pilots are hanging on the blades, as we call it, waiting for their land time on the ship. And so they have extra time and fuel, at least when they're landing on ship, when they're doing ship operations, to go and check these things out. And like he said, not balloons, man. Very interesting. So please like this video. It It really helps the channel, helps the video. Subscribe to get notifications. I at least publish a video every Friday, but I try and put out as many as fast as I can. And please consider subscribing to the Patreon. Put out backstage content, exclusive videos. It's only $5 a month. And like I said, no other sponsorships. Rely only on you guys. I'm beholden to no one, well, except you guys, the audience. But that's it, right? Grassroots. This is it. Check out Ryan's organizations. Check out ASA. Check out his Merge podcast. And thanks again for being here. Have a great day. Peace.